Welcome to Your Idaho, brought to you by the Gem State Patriot. My name is Bob Neugebauer, and my guest is former Senator Russ Fulcher. It's nice to have you here with us today, Russ.
Bob, I always like talking to you.
Well, I like talking to you, too. We just don't get a chance to do enough of it.
Not enough time, never enough time, but appreciate you.
I'd like to start a discussion off talking about the issue of constitutional carry. And the first thing I'd like to do is to understand where you stand on constitutional carry and why.
I support it. One thing I learned that over the course of time in dealing with Second Amendment related issues is I find it ironic that that there's a significant portion of lawmakers and of our government that don't trust their own citizens to carry a weapon. And so let's just think about that for a second. What does it mean when a government won't trust its own people with weapons?
There's got to be a concern.
There's got to be a concern there. And so I've kind of formulated this mindset of never trust a government that won't trust you with a weapon. So if I'm going to entrust a government with a weapon, I think they ought to trust me with one. Because if not, then you have to take that discussion to the next point and say, well, okay, if the government won't trust its citizens with weapons, then who really is the government? Well, the foundational government that I'm familiar with, it's of the people, by the people, for the people. We are the government.
Yeah.
And so I think that is simply a fulfillment of the Second Amendment intent. And when I come across lawmakers who want to constrain my rights in that area, I think that they have the priorities reversed in who should be in charge.
Well, what amazes me is that everybody wants a rating from the NRA that's an A+. Okay? So they all hurry and scurry around at the legislature when a gun bill comes up and they want to get their name on it or they want to change it so they have something in it, and therefore nothing gets done. We have the NRA down there now who had presented a separate bill, I guess along with Senator Hagedorn, who seems to be mixed up in this stuff all the time, and I can't for the life of me understand why, because every time he puts one up there, it doesn't seem to get accomplished. But in any case, Greg Patriot has been working very hard with his group, the Idaho
Second
Amendment Alliance.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, right.
And they had a march down on the Capitol the other day, which the press said there were only 12 people there, a couple dozen. There were a little over 300, 350 people. So we're not going to get any help from the press. We understand that. But we're putting an article out that Doug Tribble, who really defined constitutional carry as a right to defend yourself, and it's a matter of your own safety. The police are not responsible for your safety. They're responsible for public safety.
Public safety, that's right.
But not for your own.
Not personal.
No, and if that's true, without a concealment permit, you are at a distinct advantage. Yet we still require a fee for a permit. Why?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It's a revenue generation source first of all, but I think you're onto something there just with that whole thought process. What is the motivation behind this? It's not truly one of the best interest of the people, I think. And your point about is Tribble. He was a police officer himself, right?
Yes, he's been that one for many years. In fact, he's down in Mountain Home right now.
Okay, so he's got some hands-on experience. And I have talked with some officers, police officers, and most people don't realize the point that you just made about public safety versus personal safety, and that is the responsibility of the police forces of public safety. So to that end, yeah, I mean there's no mention of licensure for weapons at all in the Constitution.
Well,
right?
no, you're absolutely right.
And so, if there's no mention of licensure, where does that fee come from? And
that's one of the problems. He mentions in his article, the cost of a permit or fee You know, when a fee is something paid for elective services. That's what a fee is. Isn't a fee really a special tax in reality when you're forced to pay it?
Yeah, I think that's the case. Yeah. Now,
those would not like Obamacare. You know, that's different, of course.
Of course, yeah. But you know, there will be those who argue that, well, you don't have to go get the permit, which is true. But if you're going to be honored your Second Amendment rights, you do.
Well, it's not only that, but if they catch you carrying a concealed weapon, you put your coat over, you have it in a glove box.
Breaking the law, yeah.
You are subject to arrest and a misdemeanor charge. So therefore, I look at this very clearly, that you're penalized if you don't have the permit. However, the police are not responsible for protecting you. Sometimes I wonder if the police are worried that if everybody has a gun and is carrying, we won't need the police anymore. Is it possible they get put out of work? But I know it's kind of going a little far. But the Idaho Constitution does allow for a state to make gun laws governing the carrying of concealed weapons. But the law contradicts the Constitution, which says no law shall impose a special tax on a possession of a firearm. So you see the dichotomy of this problem.
Sure.
Nobody seems to get this, and least of all our legislators. Again, you know, when you have no choice in the matter, like protecting yourself, it's not it's not anything but a special tax if you're forced to pay a fee.
Yeah, it's interesting, and that's an argument that you just made that, frankly, we don't hear a lot of at the legislative level, but it's a valid argument. And I would just add a couple of things here. So where does that come from? You know, there are legislators, and I think a lot of people who have bought into what I think is a lie, driven by a very moderate to liberal constituency in the press, that somehow if we restrict access to weapons, we're going to reduce crime, or we're going to improve safety. But, you know, once again, by definition, criminals are those who don't pay attention to those laws in the first place. And so what do we do? What's the impact? What's the effect of constraining those things? Well, you just make it more of an advantageous position for the criminal.
Absolutely.
And so you got a couple dynamics going on here. You got a flawed, in my view, a flawed reasoning that is driven by a desire for control. Governments want control. The liberal to moderate mindset thinks that government should have control, and so that all feeds there. And then you've got that appetite for revenue generation. So what do? You tax it. You hang a fee on it. And it's usually the wrong solution. In this case, I think it is here too.
Well, when you take a look at the statistics, and I don't care where you go in the country or even out of the country to look at statistics, when you have restrictive gun laws, you have more crime. And it's not always just with guns. You know, more people are killed with hammers than they are with guns. The point here is that if this is the case, and it's proven time and time again, what is it that keeps the legislators from understanding that guns in the hands of law-abiding citizens is the way to make Idaho the safest? You know, I've been to a lot of different states. I've lived in a lot of different states, and I've had guns pointed at me 3 times. And I've had one shot at me in the back of a cab. Little scary. But I was fortunate all 3 times. I couldn't carry a gun back there because I couldn't get a permit. They didn't give permits out unless you knew somebody. Now, I come out here. I've been carrying since I moved out here. And I don't intend ever to stop. But I think you'll find that when they changed the laws back east in the places that I used to live, the crime went down. It goes down in Chicago, it went down in Washington, it went down in Louisiana, as soon as people start carrying guns.
Some of the worst gun crime statistics are in the areas with the tightest gun control.
Yes, exactly.
And I think there's a couple things coming to mind as you're just making those points. The first thing is, I really think the press has had a dramatic impact on lawmakers' actions there. if you take a strong Second Amendment position, most of the time you're going to get vilified in the press. They're going to make you look like some kind of a weirdo. And they'll vilify those people, and they'll broadcast that like you're some kind of a gun wacko or whatever. I think that's had a big impact. But if to your point, if you just look statistically, not just in our own country, but outside of our country,
right,
and historically, every single time that a society has been constrained or lost the right to bear arms and to protect themselves, it has never worked out in the best interest of the people.
Well, I mean, we've seen what's happened in a lot of country where they have taken the guns away. You know, I kind of laugh because we have 300 million guns in the hands of people, of Americans here in the United States. And everybody says, well, we need Homeland Security. We are our Homeland Security.
Yeah.
And if they stopped giving the money and they didn't do anything for the next 2 months, I'm not really concerned.
Yeah.
Because I carry wherever I go. And I am trained to use a gun. I have been trained. But if it ever came to the point where I had to defend some other person, whether it be in a mall or a parking lot or whatever, I have the ability to do that. And I would prefer to have the people have the reasoning and the ability to do that than in many cases the Department of Homeland Security or sometimes even the police. And believe me, I know the police are out here, they're good. But by the same token, we have the people running these police departments that really want to hammer on us with these concealed weapons permits. They don't want to let go.
Yeah. You know, not all of them, though. I remember within the last 2 years, we had I can't remember the specific detail of the bill, but the Fraternal Order of Police came down to the legislature, and they testified on behalf.
I was there for that.
On behalf. And, you know, I thought, you know what, I went and I talked to them afterwards, and you know what, they were realistic about it. And they made the same point that I think it was Traubel did. It says, look, Russ, you'd be surprised at the number of times that we get called where we're going to be several minutes on response time.
Sure.
That response time is life or death window.
Yes.
And even if we do get there in time, we can't get to all of the calls for help. Number two, there's always going to be an amount of time, and in most cases, that response time is the decision-making window of whatever good or bad happens.
Right.
And so, to that end, you know, I think the reasonable police officer will also concur with the need for the public to be armed.
I agree.
There's one other thing that came to mind when you were talking that just popped into my head, and I remember, I think it was the first interview, and I could be wrong here, but this will be close. I think it was the first interview that Ronald Reagan had after he was recovering from being shot. And he was asked, so, Mr. President, have you changed your mind on gun control? He says, absolutely not. He says, I think this proved that I was right.
Right.
And the reporter said, well, explain yourself. He said, well, Washington, D.C. has got, at that time, the tightest gun control laws in the nation. And it was just proven that they don't work. And you know what? Here's a guy who just took a bullet, and you know, I'm going, you know, that's a pretty good point.
Excellent point. I think that maybe we should send you down to the legislature, have a little talk with these guys. What do you think? You have some time?
Yeah, geez, I got to think about running for office one of these days.
Well, is there anything else you want to talk about as far as constitutional carry, or?
You know, I just got to go back to that premise, and this is one of these things that I've always been pro Second Amendment, Bob, and you know, I grew up in Idaho. I grew up on a farm, and it was just we always had. I mean, it was just part of our culture, part of our life growing up. I've never been in an environment where I didn't have, you know, firearms around, but as time's gone on, and as this debate has has kind of continued to roll out, I look at those, like for example, in California right now, there's a big effort to try to code all the ammunition, right? Mm-hmm. And that whole effort is simply a means of gun control. I mean, that's what they're really trying to do. If you don't have the ammunition, or you make it so intrusive to use it that by default you accomplish your ends. And I go back to that premise that we talked about earlier. Don't trust a government that won't trust you. Don't trust that government to be able to have weapons if they won't trust you to have them as well.
Good point. I think I'll go down to Cabela's and get some more ammo today.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure. It's
Appreciate
always
it.
good. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a good day.